let's talk about whitewood number 2. We'll begin by focusing on the lower thirds. The first thing you probably notice here is the asymmetrical layout. In fact, I can't think of many games that have an asymmetrical layout. Where this actually came from, I mentioned in the last video being influenced by Williams' early space games, Space Shuttle, and Space Station. Space Station has these really interesting arrangement with the slings and the flippers where there effectively is no inlane. And while that's interesting, I thought maybe it would be too much to have the entire game be that way. So I combined it with a Jaws-style right half and a Space Shuttle-style left half. Sling geometry ends up being different. We've got a 3.8-inch diagonal on the right and about a little over a 4 1/4 on the left. Just like the original Space Station, I added a little bit of an area on the left above the flipper to make sure that the ball can still be held there. But what's post-passing like? Of course, going from right over to the left is fairly similar. In fact, the lack of post on the left doesn't really matter. Where it really shows up is when you're trying to pass from the left to the right. I've tried various techniques, including nudging it into the sling or using some of the posts that are a little bit higher on the left side to bounce it over. I actually do about 50% of the time manage to get it over from the left flipper to the right flipper, but it certainly creates a much different player experience. You may have noticed I just attempted a ski pass and it actually went into the sling. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. There's just a little bit of a different experience here. Now, to offset this, I have made a couple of other changes to the geometry. The pop bumper is actually way off to the far right. It's in front of the plunge lane. And the idea there was to avoid having any kind of straight down the middle reactions from the ball off of the pop. The other thing that I've changed is because there's no inlane on the left, the outline is actually a little bit tighter, and you'll see that there are 2 posts here, like a little bit of a wider area with slightly more rubber, making the ball harder to get into the left outlane. One design challenge that I had to face is if you're going to have 4 indicators above the lanes, what happens when you've deleted the left inlane? So to get around that, and I say that because there's no switch. The ball normally has a rollover switch where you can activate the lights based on the 4 switches. So I ended up adding a target down here. TBD if I keep this or not. It's actually almost impossible to hit on purpose. You can if you're really thinking about it and trying. I've noticed that it also gets hit accidentally based on bouncing off of the right sling. So TBD really if I keep this. It's an interesting idea, and I think with a whitewood number 2, it's certainly a time to try something like this. One last feature I haven't mentioned is I put a post, and a powered coil up-down post here in the drain lane. And when it's in its up position, it's actually just big enough to hold the ball. Full disclosure, that was an accident. I'm not sure what I was expecting here. I just wanted to experiment with it. And once I get to the stage of having some gameplay rules, I'm going to see how this actually feels and plays out. It feels a little bit like D&D, so I am 50-50 on if I like this or not. But again, it's whitewood number 2, and I want to experiment. Where I have been working recently is in the top third, which is where the 2 overlapping orbits are. Taking a look at whitewood number 1, I have been using 3D prints to prototype this. And you can see that the way this is laid out is there's an outer orbit, and that goes into a half ramp that leads up to a platform. And then this platform gets skinnier and skinnier as the orbit goes around. And it requires that the ball will be hit with enough force so that it has centrifugal force. It has a little bit of pull to it to make it all the way around this orbit. In fact, the ball on the test version here, whitewood number 1, does that. The second orbit is this, I'm calling it the center orbit. It still goes from right to left though. And the way that this works is that the ball will ride along this lower edge. Now I mentioned that this is a half ramp because it doesn't actually take the ball up high enough for it to enter a wire form or another playfield. In fact, the thickness of this platform is only about 3/4 of an inch. How to actually produce this is a little tricky because that front edge has to be entirely smooth for the ball to roll around. I was originally just going to fabricate this out of some 1-inch strip stainless steel, but I realized that because of the height changes, I needed to have some different heights in here. I ended up, this is draft number 1, but I ended up getting this cut by Sencut Sen. So you can see there's this flat pattern here. There's 2 different ways that the ball guide is going to mount to the top of the playfield. One is by way of these tabs that are bent. They have a little bit of a slot so that I have some wiggle room. And the second is these smaller little holes. Those will fit a spade bolt. So far, I haven't been a fan of bending ball guides by hand. So the first thing after that I attempted with was to use a ring roller like this one. This model is common on Amazon. You spin the handle in the front, and then on the back side, the material feeds in, and it gets squished through and rolled into some radius. I don't like this model for two reasons. Number one, the side that you feed and the handle is different. And number two, it does leave a little bit of a mark on your material. Here's a quick look at what the guides coming out of that first ring roller look like. You can see there's a little bit of a textured pattern on it. It's not awful, but it's not great. And me being slightly perfectionistic, I didn't want to mess with it. That said, I know that there are plenty of builders that use these, and once they're put in a game, the marks, the blemishes just kind of disappeared. Here's my second roller. This one I did find on Amazon, but I believe this is only made by one company. This addresses the two issues that I had with the previous ring roller. It uses ball bearings, which are smooth for rolling the material, so there's a lot less marring that takes place. The second thing is the feed is on the same side as the handle, so it's a lot easier to do by yourself and see what you're doing. The two downsides that I have found to this roller are that it's painted on the front, and I've already scratched that multiple times. The second thing is that because the handle is on the front side, it does impose a little bit of a restriction of how wide of a piece of material you can put in here. My guess is that probably 3 inches or so is about the max width that you can run through this. And you can see from the video that I am already at that maximum. As for supporting that rear half ramp, I thought of, first of all, cutting it out of plywood. This was CNC cut. Both the top and the face that the ball rolls into were cut. And is this going to be a good idea? I don't know. Again, I'm still in a little bit of the experimentation phase with all of this. I used Send-Cut Send to cut a custom flap. Unfortunately, this flap is 0.015 inches, whereas flaps are normally 0.010 inches. It's slightly thicker, and while the shape is correct, it doesn't have much flex to it. So again, TBD on if this is going to work out or if I'm going to have to use shim stock to just make one by hand. I've got 2 of these guides rolled, both the inner orbit, center orbit guide, as well as the outer orbit reject guide. Both of them I think are about the same, but I still need to add the spade bolts, and I need a couple of other pieces in place before I permanently mount these down, but it's looking good so far. Lastly, of course, we can't not talk about wiring, as that's something that I have been putting in a decent amount of time on as well. I think I haven't shown a ton of wiring content yet on my channel because I'm not quite sure if this is really boring or not, watching somebody solder and explain the addition of diodes. It's technical. Like wiring is one of those things where it's more technical than it is interesting. You read the documentation, you figure out that you need this diode, and then you connect to this wire to this pin. And once you know how to crimp and solder, that's about all there is to it. Anyways, if you'd be more interested in seeing additional wiring type content on this channel, you can let me know. But for now, I just have a little bit of footage here of me getting stuff done. Which, by the way, I actually recorded myself doing a decent amount of this. I realized after the fact that I was standing in front of the camera half the time, so maybe this is a YouTuber area of growth for me to be able to film wiring content that I'm not constantly blocking with my arm. Well, anyways, that is so far the progress of Whitewood number 2. I have a little bit of vacation time still remaining, wherein I am going to try to continue working on little bits here and there. My goal is to get to the right orbit and center orbit shots being completely usable and shootable from the flipper, and then move on from there. Pop.